Is animated Star Wars for kids? Technically, all of Star Wars is for kids, or at least it started off that way. I mean, the original has a U rating. A film in which people get their limbs chopped off at an impressive rate is considered universal. Guess it was a different time. Anyway, my take on Star Wars is that it's not for kids, and it's not for the slavering fans, such as myself. It's for everyone. There is something to like about Star Wars for just about everyone. And yes, there have been ups and downs, but in a franchise that's been going for so long, there is going to be. But even the downs, or at least the parts that were once considered to be downs, have kind of got a renewed appreciation as their original viewers have got older. I'm obviously talking about the prequels. And the sequels will probably get the same treatment as well. But today I want to talk about specifically the animated shows, Clone Wars and Rebels. And Rebels especially, I mean, that was shown on a specific, was it Disney XD or whatever, a kids channel. It's almost like Nickelodeon. And the first few seasons, like first 1 or 2 seasons of Clone Wars, did feel more juvenile in their focus. But if you watch the entirety of Clone Wars and Rebels, you'll see some really quite mature subject matter, and I don't mean mature. There's always that mix-up in people's minds about mature content. They think mature content just means swearing, violence, and sex. It doesn't. If your property is trying to market itself as being mature purely on those aspects, then you're not mature, you're puerile. What mature content really is complex, hard-hitting topics that you generally need a maturer mind who has some extent of life experience to fully appreciate. And I'm not saying that you can't have something that appeals to, both kids and adults in the same show. I mean, a lot of shows do it. Hell, my son's recently started watching Phineas and Ferb, and I'm laughing just as much as he is. He's laughing at the silly thing they're doing this week, and I'm laughing at something Doofenshmirtz has said under his breath because I can relate. And I feel the Clone Wars is very much like that. I mean, in the prequels, the clones were copy-paste soldiers. Yeah, you had a few individuals, but there wasn't much distinguishing them from the rest of the army. In the Clone Wars, they went out of their way to characterize these characters, which were, by definition, supposed to be homogenous, and they gave them stories which were interesting and deep, and they had conflicts and concerns, and in some ways I think that the series matured with its audience, which is a very good way to do it. Like, yeah, the first couple of seasons started off with a little bit more of the adventure of the week. Oh, we need to save this, do this, that and the other. But even those had thought going into them. I mean, the whole character of Ahsoka, the fact that she was set up so that the first few times you saw her, you would hate her guts. And then she was supposed to basically fall and get her comeuppance and learn lessons. And that in itself is mature. It's because you're not just got a cookie cutter character that doesn't ever grow or change. You've got a character that is very overconfident and then has to overcome the problems that they experience. And that only got more so as the series went on. I mean, especially when she left the Jedi Order. But I think that maturity continues on, and the series maturing with its audience continues on into The Bad Batch, because The Bad Batch very much carries on in the style of Series 7 of the Clone Wars and has a lot more of the kind of like harder hitting, morally driven quandaries. I mean, here's me talking about all the maturity doesn't need to be, violence and swearing and stuff, but that's not to say that the Clone Wars is devoid of stuff that I wouldn't let my kid watch, because it's got some pretty gnarly stuff. For a series that's supposed to be for kids, got people getting impaled, tortured. In Series 7, that whole bit with Maul ripping off bulkheads in order to decapitate people, or is it bisect? Either way, one, it's rad. And two, like I say, I wouldn't let my kid watch it, so even if he is a little bit older than he is at the moment. But there, I think my point is that the show doesn't talk down to its audience. It's much more like the cartoons I used to watch when I was growing up. I mean, if you're British and in your 30s, you may very well remember a little show called Animals of Farthing Wood. And man, that show was heavy. And I was watching it when I was like 5. But that's my point. It's good when children aren't spoken down to, but also we don't want to push the envelope so much that they're watching stuff that is, too much for them. And I think Clone Wars, for the most part, toes that line pretty well. As does Rebels. And yes, Rebels absolutely has more of a lighter air to it. And that might be simply because it's not based around wartime events. But it does have a lot more kind of silly comedy, pratfalls, stuff like that. Whole thing with Ezra and Zeb. And, when the bunk falls on Zeb, that's very much kind of slapstick kiddie humour. Not saying that I didn't enjoy it, I laughed as much as the next person. But the series also does keep that maturity with all of the characters, especially Ezra, growing and developing and becoming better people, becoming stronger, and then you have sacrifices, and again it kind of ages with its audience to the point where, spoilers for Rebels, if you haven't seen it, which you should, because it is good. It's really good. Don't have anybody tell you it's just for kids. It's anybody can enjoy it. It's really good. Anyway, there's a bit in it where Kanan basically sacrifices himself to save the rest of the crew, and that is a moment that's up there. Just the fact that he's because he's been blinded and he's kind of like the sightless messiah type thing. And he's holding back this fireball, and he turns around and it's almost like the Force gives him back his sight so that he can see Hera one last time, and so that Hera can see that it's okay. And all of that's conveyed through looks. And this is an animated show, so one, they've nailed the animation to be able to do that, even though it is kind of like a stylized animation style. And two, to have that level of depth in basically a kids show is exactly what I'm talking about, how they don't talk down to kids. It's not ever outright said, oh yeah, Kanan and Hera, they're basically a couple. It's never outright said that, but it's implied all the way through that they're basically the parents to Ezra, Sabine and Zeb, even though Zeb is in his 40s or something, I don't know. And the show kind of trusts that the audience understands all of that, so that this moment can be as impactful as it is without exposition. And that really is just a testament to how well it's written and produced, and is why I'm really enjoying Star Wars at the moment. Yeah, you've got these people who are kind of naysayers and they say, oh, sequels are, no, I don't like what's happening with the Mandoverse and stuff like that. It doesn't take away from the good that's come before. Like I say, there's been ups and downs in everything, so enjoy the ups. Anyway, I'm very excited for the Ahsoka series. It's going to be great to see all these Rebels characters in live action, and it seems like they've got a pretty stellar cast. And the fact that, what's his name, Steve Blum, actually comes back to voice Zeb, or has come back to voice Zeb. We've got a sneak preview from the Mando already, and his freaking CGI looks incredible. And I think it was a stellar choice in a franchise that leans heavily on its practical effects, and I do love the practical effects. For someone like Zeb, in order to get across the level of emotiveness that you would need to match his animated counterparts, I think having CGI, especially CGI of that quality, was just generally a brilliant idea. Yeah, anyway, let me know what future Star Wars shows you're excited for. Definitely Ahsoka and Andor Series 2 are up there for me, and I guess I'll see you next time.